So, it's been a little while since I last did a video, and I was thinking it would be fun to do a video about my top three favorite and probably most used monsters in D&D, aside from things like wolves or guards or bandits or something. More like unique monsters, because if I just did the top three monsters I've used in D&D, it would just be like a bunch of random stuff like that. But this is kind of a list of my top three favorite monsters to use in D&D, is probably the better way to put it. To contextualize this list a little bit, the vast majority of adventures I've ever ran in D&D took place in like the level 1 to 4 range, starting a lot of early adventures. So this list really, it has a skew towards monsters that are good earlier, or have like that utility earlier, or should I rather say at lower levels. Number 3 is dragons. They had to be on this list somewhere, and I like them a lot. I'm a big fan, but I do like the next two more. But yeah, number 3 is dragons, and there's quite a few reasons why they're on this list. I'll say number 1, reason number 1, they're really fucking cool. They just are. You know, I don't. If I have to explain why dragons are cool, I'm assuming that you don't really understand, or you don't really like fantasy. Number 2 would be the massive narrative potential of dragons. The main dragons in D&D are separated into two groups. The evil group of chromatic dragons and the good group of metallic dragons. On top of this dichotomy of good and evil, the dragons also vary between chaotic and lawful variations, so they essentially cover the entire spectrum of alignment. The dragons also vary in terms of personality and intelligence by quite a bit, from the extremely intelligent green and copper dragons to the animalistic white dragons. The third thing that I really like about dragons, and I'm a big fan of, is all the different dragons have kind of an easy way in terms of ecology. Like the blue dragons, who mostly live in deserts and badlands, or the black dragons, who mostly live in swamps. They kind of have like a set area or biome where they're supposed to be found, which makes it really easy. Because, you know, when I'm working on an adventure and I'm in an area, I kind of have to think about the ecology of that area. Like, there needs to be reasons for animals or monsters or whatever to be where they are. And the dragons kind of are automatically in that. And then that also opens up more narrative opportunity. Like, maybe you find a black dragon wormling in a desert, and, you know, he doesn't want to be there, and it's wicked uncomfortable for him, and he got lost somehow and ended up in this desert, or maybe he got outcompeted in the swamps by another black dragon or maybe a green dragon, and so now he's forced to be in this desert, and maybe because of that he's wreaking havoc, trying to find somewhere to go, or needing to consume extra resources because he's all stressed out. And, you know, in a situation like this, your party could either have to take down this enemy or maybe help them return home. If it's a more good alignment dragon, or perhaps it's a lawful evil dragon and it's willing to cooperate with the party to get it back to where it's supposed to go. So all that is very interesting, and also a lot of the dragons have overlapping ecologies, so situations like that are completely reasonable and are kind of intended. For example, a blue dragon could live on a rocky coastline or, seaside cliffs or something of that nature because that's one of its preferred habitats, and at the same time, a bronze dragon could be living there because they dwell on coastlines and they live in wrecked ships and whatnot. So that's a force of evil and a force of good that are both very powerful in the same area. Lots of very interesting stuff you can do with that. And then on top of this, the dragons also vary in power level, from the high 20s at Ancient to Challenge Rating 2 for some Wyrmlings. So, no matter what narrative you're doing, no matter what environment it takes place in, no matter if you need a villain or a hero or an advisor, someone to be pulling the strings, someone to be scheming, just a classic dragon terrorizing the countryside, all those things are doable, and you can introduce these elements as low challenge rating as challenge rating 2, or as high up as, like I said, the high 20s, which could be like a world level threat. Monster number 2 is the Mephits. I'm a big Mephit fan, and there's so many reasons why they're a great monster. Back in earlier editions of D&D, they kind of were around like the level 4-ish range, and they had spellcasting abilities that were more varied. They had different types of abilities, and they were cool, but the 5th edition Mephits take a role that is so efficient, varied. The Mephits in 5th edition take a role that is so necessary to fill. So the Mephits have always been para-elementals or sub-elementals, whatever you want to call them, the combination between two different elements. So, you have the Dust Mephit, which is earth and air, the Ice Mephit, which is air and water, the Smoke Mephit, which is air and fire, the Steam Mephit, which is fire and water, the Magma Mephit, which is earth and fire, and the Mud Mephit, or previously the Ooze Mephit, which is earth and water. These Mephits in 5th edition range between half a challenge rating to a quarter of a challenge rating. And all of them except the Mud Mephit have innate once a day spellcasting of minor effects. They all have a death effect when they die. They all have a breath attack. And they all can fly. And they're all relatively weak in melee combat. They're very dynamic in combat. You can use them for adding more to a combat than just staying in melee and, hitting attacks, because they can fly, they have their breath attack, they have death bursts. Like, it forces your players to really think a lot, and you could do this at a very low level because they're low challenge rating. Also, the Mephits can be used in so many environments. Like, some of them, like the Ice Mephit or the Magma Mephit, right? They're only going to be around ice or like a volcano. So yeah, that's a little less. But like a Mud Mephit, if your world is very heavily steeped in magic that you're working in, a Mud Mephit could just be like at a riverbank or in a swamp. And a Dust Mephit can just be in an old cavern, or in a sand dune. And a Smoke or Steam Mephit could be just created by human activity and just be around cities and stuff. Also, they're low-level elementals. 5th edition doesn't really have a lot of low-level elementals, Unfortunately, you kind of have like the base elementals like earth, fire, water, air, and then you have a couple other elementals that are lower level than that, and then a couple that are a little higher level, like the genies. Yeah, like, those are all good, but Mephits fill that role of a very low challenge rating elemental. Also, since they are para-elementals, or what have you, they help a lot when it comes to homebrewing. Homebrewing para-elementals of other challenge ratings, of other sizes or differences. Like, for example, I was working on an ice elemental for the current adventure I'm doing, and the ice Mephit has these abilities that kind of evoke like jagged ice or like frost, kind of like vision obscuring, reminiscent of something like a snowstorm, and like obviously that's what ice elemental is going to be around, but it's still good inspiration, and you know, it could even go on from there if I wasn't doing a basic elemental but something else. Also, these Mephits have some level of like imp-like characteristics, which is fantastic for storytelling. They could be mischievous, downright like straight up evil and malicious, like goofy. They kind of fill that funny role. You can always get a laugh out of them if you want, but they could also be menacing. They just have fantastic utility. They do so much narratively, in combat, when it comes to making adventures. They're fantastic. They also look really funny. Huge fan of Mephits. Any of my players would definitely know that Mephits would be on this list. Okay, and my number one monster to use in Dungeons and Dragons, and maybe my favorite Dungeons and Dragons monster in general, is the Grick. Yeah, that's kind of a strange pick, but they have a good combination of use in game, and I just find their design fucking really cool. Throughout the editions they've been present, they've kind of had the same role and very little information. They're more of just a wild beast. But their basic nature, it doesn't need to be complex. Gricks inhabit dark areas underground where they await their prey using their really good camouflage. And Gricks have to feed a lot, so they'll go places they know prey is going to come. So that they could be in a dungeon and they know adventurers are going to come down there, and that could be their preferred prey even. Also, again, their design is just fucking awesome. They used to be an aberration, and now in 5th edition they're just a monstrosity, which I don't really care either way, but they have that freaky look to them, like otherworldly, with like the tentacles, with the claws at the end, and crazy. They're also a low-level monster that has damage resistance against non-magical weapons, which is really cool. Maybe not something your players are going to pick up on, but it makes them very durable, especially at CR2. But the reason why I like using Gricks so much is it makes your players afraid. You know, you have some newer players playing a low-level adventure in Dungeons & Dragons. They're going through a small dungeon or a cavern or what have you, and they're not searching around too much, they're not being too cautious, they're kind of just making their way through, and then they walk into a darker room. They just go walk by, and then all of a sudden, a giant, terrifying, like, eldritch horror just falls on top of them, and, you know, gets advantage, sneak attack, can grab them up and then hit them again. Crazy damage output at those levels. It can almost one-hit kill somebody. And that combat is going to be very frightening, especially for players who've never encountered a Greek before. But after the combat's over, all these players now have an idea that, oh shit, there's things hiding in the dark. There's things outside of our vision that maybe are very stealthy. I should be scared when I'm in a dungeon. I should slowly take my time, and there's tension now. Any cavern players go into, they're thinking, okay, well, a couple times ago or whatever, last time I was in a cave, a giant fucking creature fell from the ceiling and one hit killed or one turn killed one of our party members, and we had to drag him out of there. They're not going to be willing to take that risk again. People are going to have torches and actually use their torches. People are going to stick to the walls, maybe going into a room with a cavernous roof, or a room with a cavernous ceiling. It's just great. And they're really cool. Great design. Freaky as fuck. Not a lot of information to them, but they're more of just like a wild creature that happens to be fantastical, right? Like, they're not explicitly magic. They're not super wacky. Like, they're not something you'd find on Earth. If you did, you'd freak out. But, like, maybe it wouldn't break our perception of reality. Just really cool. Big fan. Yep, so that was just a quick little video. I wanted to make a video. Was thinking about what it should be, and I had this idea. So, yeah. Some cool creatures from Dungeons & Dragons that I like to use against my players to kill them. Swag.